Great day, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Strategic Possibilities Show, where we discuss success and growth to help you launch potential in your personal and professional life. My name is Emmett Ferguson, and I am your host. And today I have a very special guest with me today, Eddie Loussararian. He's an author of 2 books. One of them is 64 Life Hacks for Success, and the other is, Eddie, I wanted to ask you about this book because I'm a sucker for hilarious titles. The other book is When Bosses Go Wild. And Eddie, I just wanted to get a little idea. I mean, can you introduce yourself to the audience a little bit, share a little bit more about what you do, and then also about that book. What inspired that title? What's it all about? And I'll let you have the floor.
Thank you, Emmett. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I love talking about employee engagement. I've dedicated my entire career to making the workplace experience for both managers and their employees a more pleasant one. And as you know, there are a lot of bad things to say about the work environment, especially these days when people are working from home. Kids are, studying. The classroom's been replaced with their bedroom. They're sitting on their bed. They don't want to get out of the bed. They're playing games. So a lot of reasons for disengagement today. So I spent the last several years researching the subject on what drives engagement in the workplace. And up came that book, When Bosses Go Wild. God put it on my heart, and I found that over 54% of the workforce in the United States was disengaged with some aspect of their job, and most of the time, most of the data pointed to a bad boss. So I thought, you know what, let's figure out what's going on out there. How can we make this a more pleasant experience for both sides? Let's learn a little bit about what the other person's going through in that moment of disengagement. And instead of, destroying morale, let's figure out a way to use our voice and our words and improve the work environment for everybody.
That's fantastic, and it's such an amazing time for well, the times are not amazing in terms of like COVID-19, but just in terms of timing for this podcast and to hear the research that you've done and how it applies to what's going on, where everybody's working from home and all of the other challenges that come with that work, where people are working what's called remotely, is very interesting. So just to get an idea, I mean, in terms of that process of writing the book, was it like one day you saw this problem and you're like, I got to write about it? Or was it just like over time you started to notice these things that could be improved, and you're a director of training, so like you just started teaching about it and then you put a book together? Can you share a little bit about like that process and inspiration?
Definitely. My motivation for selecting this topic was I get an opportunity to interact with people at all stages of their career. When they first start with a new company, they're excited about new opportunities. They want to work for a great company. We want to have impact in that great company, and we look for challenges and how to best overcome them. And most people can do that unless there's something that gets in the way of that happiness. And in my research, I discovered, and in my interviews with people, I discovered that it was usually a bad boss who was creating a toxic work environment that was standing in the way of progress. So being so engaged in my work and what I do, and having had so many wonderful role models orbit in and out of my life over the years, I said, why not focus on this topic when it seems like a lot of people are not happy about going to work every day? Let's get them fired up instead. Let's get them, get that frown turned upside down, so to speak, as juvenile as that sounds. But believe it or not, when you don't want to get out of bed because there's one person standing in the way of your happiness, and for you delivering on a productive career and rising up the corporate ladder, if that one person is the only impediment standing in your way, then let's address what that person is doing and what you can do to change the course of your career.
That's great. So basically, so is the book more so, because at the end there, you were talking about how to get that individual, who wants to rise in their career, to get them in a conversation. So is the book written for managers, or is it written for, trainers, or, people looking to, I guess, understand bosses better for the purpose of their own careers?
That's a great question, Emmett. So realizing that bosses aren't all that bad and employees don't get out of bed saying, you know what, I'm going to tank today. I'm not going to bring in my A game. I realized early on that people are challenged by different things. So I decided to write this book from a very neutral standpoint instead of bashing one side versus the other, instead of putting all of the blame on the manager and taking the employee side wholeheartedly. I said, let's take a neutral stance, let's allow others to discover what the other half is going through in that moment. So it's written from both perspectives, managers and employees. And after I talk about each of the 12 bad boss behaviors as I've labeled them, I talk in terms of what that person's going through in that moment. One example in one of the chapters in my book is the credit snatcher. And I talk about what the boss can do to destroy an employee's morale when he or she steals the employee's credit. So the employee works hard on a project, a week later produces a report, that boss goes into a meeting and takes the credit for that report as if he or she did it himself. So obviously, some employees would take offense to that and that would destroy their morale. Employees don't necessarily know what to do in that situation. Do they lash out? Do they remain quiet? Do they stand on the teamwork side and say, you know what, my boss has my back? The response could be different depending on your own experiences. So I said, in this situation, Mr. Supervisor, Miss Supervisor, if you do this, in other words, steal your employee's credit, this is the likely response of your employee's morale. And on the flip side, I said to the employee, if your supervisor is stealing your credit, then this is how I recommend you respond. And there are 12 chapters like that where I go back and forth between employee and supervisor. I talk about a morale killer, and I explain to both sides what the other person's going through given that situation.
Very nice, and I think that's one approach that is pretty unique to that the realm of, I guess, management training books, in the sense that you do take those multiple approaches, as opposed to taking that one perspective and saying, oh, maybe you shouldn't do this or maybe you should do this, but to consider the possible consequences from both sides based on your reaction. So I think that's awesome.
Indeed.
And wanted to learn a little bit more about what, outside of the book, what you do as a professor and a director of training.
Definitely. So I've earned my MBA, and I studied hospitality management for my undergrad, and I've had a 10-year career in hospitality, working for 2 Fortune 100 companies. And for the last 17 years, I've been a director of training in the flooring industry. So the company I work for is a marketer, designer, and distributor in the flooring space, so tile and natural stone. And I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities over the years to interact with some amazing people. And all along, it's become clear to me that people are excited about contributing to the company's success. There are some things, though, that get in the way of that happiness, that joy. It's when their voice is not heard. It's when they feel disrespected, when they feel like their boss is speaking out of both sides of their mouth, for example, when they don't feel like they have autonomy, or that they're not empowered to do the job that they were hired to do. So let's face it, creating a workplace culture that breeds high morale and an engaged workforce doesn't happen by accident. And I think you'll agree with me on that, Emmett. It requires leadership. And that leadership has to be wise, empathetic, discerning, thoughtful, and caring leadership. And it's not a leadership that you can fake. It's one that has to come from within, from the ethos of who you are as a person. So this is one of the subjects that if we get right as leaders, productivity goes up, turnover goes down, retention goes up, sales, profits follow. on the way up, and performance just skyrockets.
Fantastic. So that there's a huge element of that going back to, employee engagement and how you interact with everybody. And yeah, I mean, definitely, when you're, well, you obviously know more about it than I do as the, director of training, but just from my experiences from the workplace, having, great leadership really makes a difference, and having people that care and that understand. And, there's a major difference between when I was working from the manager that had been trusted at many really successful companies, and he took the philosophies that he gained from all of the different trainings that he had, and like from books that he recommended to me, and different managers who adopted different philosophies. So huge differences in how it affected me and impacted me in my performance. So that's awesome that you are able to transform that into an informative book for both, the manager and the individual. So to get an idea, in terms of 64 life hacks for success, can you tell us a little bit about that? Who's that for, and what's that all about? It's a newer book, right?
Indeed, it's coming out this week, as a matter of fact, and I've spent the last year and a half developing this book. There are a lot of reasons why people are dissatisfied with life. Maybe it's they have fallen into and out of love. Maybe their relationship with their children isn't going the way they want. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it has to do with work. Maybe it has to do with a host of other things. So I chose to write about this subject because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very big on creating a happy, not only workplace, but happier life. And I found that the 64 life hacks that I wrote about contain practical and inspirational messages to help people when life gets in the way. So it started out as inspirational messages that I was sending out every Friday to our company and a select handful of customers. Really blossomed into something special because the employee base, we have about 1,200 employees. I was also including about 100 or so customers. I found that the day after I published this, they were responding back to me. Many of them were responding saying, Eddie, I really needed this encouragement. I needed this uplifting word today. This message applies to me. And I really love the tactics and the strategies that you pointed out in these messages. And I thought, wow, after a handful of these, I thought, well, maybe if I keep doing this every Friday, it'll blossom into something special. And that's what indeed happened. So based on the feedback, I kept refining the messages, and up came the book, 64 Life Hacks for Success. What I'm really proud about in this messages, or in these messages, the collection of messages, is I point out challenges that really drag people down because they appear to be, on the surface, insurmountable barriers. And if you've never gone through that barrier or down that road before, how do you know how to get out of it, right? You think it's some untenable circumstance that you're never going to get a better job, you're never going to be in a better relationship, you're never going to make more money. And these are real life challenges that I've woven into short stories. So it's about a page and a half or two for each story. And I like to call it an allegorical message. So I give you a brief glimpse into an experience that I had, and then I weave that experience into a management, motivational, or leadership message that applies to the masses. And in doing so, in applying these strategies, you start thinking outside the box. Rather than sitting there and going down the exact same path that you've been doing for years, rather than listening to no one's advice but yours, there's a collection of techniques in this book that'll get you out of the doldrums and onto a different path of success. And it's easy to think of the world as heading downhill fast, and who knows, maybe it is. But successful people don't worry about that because they know they can't get up in things that they can't control. Instead, they focus their energy on directing the two things that are completely within their power. And this is what I wrote about extensively in 64 Life Hacks for Success. What they pay attention to and what they commit effort to is what ultimately is going to drive their success and happiness.
Wow. And thank you so much for sharing that, because not only are you releasing here next week or two, so everybody hear that, 64 Life Hacks for Success by Eddie Loussararian. But what I also liked about the story is that these are life hacks that you've actually sent out to people before. And these have been proven, as you mentioned, to help these other people. So I think that's great that, and not even just that too, but also the fact that you're able to share this. I think it's a life hack in itself, the idea that, you're able to share these with people. And as you were doing that, you realized that they would help people. So you put it into a book. And I think that can help a lot of people out there who maybe have wanted to write a book or have wanted to produce something, but they're not even sure what, even when the things that they're doing might be things that they're doing every single day. So I think that's a very inspirational and a very practical executable idea there that our audience can take away too, on top of the fact that they should check out the book.
And Emmett, I want to add one more thing to
Sure.
that. The 64 musings, as I call them, are not intended to be read like a conventional book, in that you're not going to flip from page one to page two and eventually end on page whatever at the end. But this particular book, 64 Life Hacks for Success, is intended to be like a daily devotional. And there's no order in which you need to read it, but I've put an index in the book to help you with keywords, so that if you're struggling with relationships or money or jobs or courage or whatever, you can go to the index, you can find that one nugget of wisdom on a particular page in the book, read that chapter for that day. Again, the chapters are very manageable. It'll take you a couple of minutes at most. It's only a 1 to 2 page read, and you'll be on your way. At least it gives you perspective of what to try that you haven't quite thought of. It'll change your perspective on the matter and hopefully get you out of those doldrums.
That's fantastic. And to be able to have a resource like that, I think is valuable to have on a desk, just to at least, be able to turn to a page and be like, okay, this is inspirational. This is helpful to me to help me get me through whatever situation it is. And just to get an idea, in terms of, you said in how you go about reading the book. So basically, are the chapters, like the titles, pretty self-explanatory in terms of, like, you flip to a page and you're like, oh, this is the type of challenge that I'm working on? Or is it a little bit more broad in terms of the message in the chapter, and then they have to, like, turn to the chapter? What's that like?
Exactly. So obviously, in the table of contents, I tried to add some pizzazz to the titles and going away from the conventional titles. I wrote about things like "Don't worry about tomorrow," "Act as if you belong," "Becoming a black belt," and that has absolutely nothing to do with the act of becoming a martial artist. But I wove into that particular chapter a short story about the Karate Kid and how Mr. Miyagi taught Danielson about becoming a champion, right? And respecting and becoming a disciplined warrior, so to speak. So within a 2-minute read, you're going to learn about a very valuable life lesson there. And I have 64 of those, and it spans across 9 different elements in life. And like I mentioned a few of them: money, relationships, faith, courage, etc. So it's very easy to read. It applies to all ages. And something I found really gratifying when I was receiving feedback from my audience every Friday was they were sharing it with their family. The adult in the room was reading this on Fridays, as I put it out there for a year. And they were taking the ones that resonated with their family life home and reading it with their wife or their spouse, with their children, all age children, and they were applying it. I talked about legacy in one of the chapters, and one of the fathers, one of my coworkers, was struggling with that topic with their children, with his children, and he had a whole conversation about how to why it's important, or why it's important to leave a legacy behind, why to do things properly, not to deviate from the path that your mother and I have led. And I found that to be so rewarding and so gratifying from a personal standpoint. And that's really what fueled the next week's topic. every week there was something unique happening, not only in my life, but people were sending me these topics, such as wake up, the day is calling. And that turned into a whole topic. Lean not on your own understanding. Somebody said, you know what? My employees are doing it their way. How do I encourage them to think out of the box and do it a different way? And that topic was born. So every week there's something special. If you choose to read it as a weekly devotional, it'll take you the full year. And there's 12 extra chapters there to make it 64 total. But or you can read it like a conventional book if you like, but realize that none of the chapters are strung together and they're all vastly different.
Very cool. And I very much enjoy reading books like that, you know, ones that have a story, but also tie an application to it. Very much like, you know, I enjoy reading like Robert Greene's books, you know, when he does a story and talks about it. Great model and very informative. So to get an idea, and this is like a fun question. And this is a question that I've wanted to ask, like, you know, various executives. And this is a question, you know, I happen to follow Jack Welch, may he rest in peace, on a lot of social media. And one thing that just blew my mind is that he's in a suit in possibly just about every single photo you could possibly find him in. And, you know, when I met you in person, I caught that you seem like the type of person that is, you know, constantly well dressed and gonna be dressed sharp no matter where you go. And that is something that, you know, I can very much appreciate. And I want to know, like, for maybe not, maybe it isn't your situation the same as everybody else's, but I want to know, like, is that habit of dressing sharp and, you know, putting on that suit and tie every day, is that something that you have to make like a conscious effort to do, in the sense, like, you know, for me personally, I would prefer not to have to put a suit on every single day, simply because, you know, I'm from Florida, I'm more comfortable and, you know, maybe like a shirt and slacks. But I want to know, for maybe you or other people in suits, would you say that, like, you are incredibly comfortable in the suit and, you know, you put it on even if you just had to, like, you know, go to McDonald's? Or, you know, is it a conscious effort, or do you love doing it? Or is it something that you do because, you know, this is like a daily habit that you've created for yourself and it's just become a part of you over time, where it just, yeah. Can you share a little bit about that? I'm just curious.
Definitely. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Emmett, I've had a number of really awesome role models come into and out of my life over the years, and I draw energy from certain people that I've encountered. And all of those people dressed up for success, and they commanded attention, right? Not because of they weren't winning their power. They weren't telling people, you know what, I'm in a power position, thus you must listen to me. In fact, many times they had influential power, not absolute power. And I love that. How you can get somebody that doesn't even report to you to buy into the message. And so I watched from the sidelines over as I was growing up, and I realized that if you're not disciplined enough, if you don't respect your position enough, no matter what kind of power the company gives you, people are not going to follow you if you don't respect and remain disciplined in all facets of your life. Can you imagine going to work in shorts or flip-flop and everyone else is wearing a suit or dressed in a suit? And flip that. If everyone is not wearing a suit and you're the only one in a suit, doesn't that raise your credibility, right? So, and for me, it was beyond that. It was a long-term investment that I was making for my children. I have 3 children. I wanted to have them grow up seeing what a white-collar worker looked like every day. Get up, do the same routine, go to work, dressed for success, come home, still dressed for success with a smile on your face, and then go to work again, teaching as I was doing, as I have been doing for the last 10 years. And so I've maintained 4 jobs for the last 10 years, and my costume, quote unquote, has never changed. because of the discipline that I learned from a young age, and also because I wanted my children to see what it should look like if you pay respect to your profession and you're disciplined enough, good things will happen in your life. Now, whether that's going to be, my brilliant investment or my brilliant idea pans out or not, that remains to be seen. My kids are still growing up, trying to figure things out themselves. But I'll report back to you in a handful of years and let you know.
Wonderful. Hey, I totally appreciate your answer, and I think this goes to a deeper level in the sense that, it's beyond just you, but also there's that bigger motivation of wanting to be a great influence for your kids. And very much appreciate you sharing that and everything that you've been putting out here. We've gone from everything from management and interacting with tough bosses to just these ideas of creating your book, 64 life hacks, and this question that I finally got to ask somebody who does live that disciplined lifestyle of having wearing a suit every single day. I think that's very powerful, and it's something that I definitely admire. When I was working in a car dealership, there was only one guy who dressed in a suit every single day, even though he didn't have to. But it just added a level of credibility, influence, and it's very admirable. So, thank you for answering that question.
My pleasure.
And that wraps it up for this episode. I've taken up a good chunk of your time, Eddie, and I totally appreciate you jumping on to this podcast episode. And is there anything else you'd like to wrap up? Any thoughts that popped up while I was talking?
Emmett, I want to leave you with this one thought and leave your audience with one last thought, and that is, you can accomplish anything you want in life, but you have to have a path to that goal. If you just wake up and expect that someone's going to give you a bag of gold or a bag of money or a promotion, it ain't going to happen. So I strongly encourage you guys, whoever's struggling with relationships, money, or anything else I've discussed, if you want to do something different, if you want a unique experience in your life, you can make that happen. But you've got to try something different. You've got to change your perspective on the matter. Don't just go about it doing it the exact same way you've been doing for days, weeks, months, whatever. Change the equation, change the variables around. Sometimes that means speaking up. Sometimes that means taking a back seat and letting somebody else have the glory. But whatever it is, do something different. In groups large and small, young and old, unique and united, we must come together, and the time is now. If you want to stand out in life, whether that's at work, in your family, if you want to make more money, do something, stand out, be unique, and you will be recognized for it in due time. It may not happen overnight. It may not happen as fast as you want it to, but stick to your plan, execute it vigorously, and expect good things to happen.
Wow, that was probably one of the most powerful endings I've had on one of these episodes. So thank you for that. And by the way, do you do speaking engagements? If someone wanted to book you, are you available, or do you primarily only speak for training and all of that?
I am available, and you can email me at ELOUSS like Sam, ARARIAN like Nancy at yahoo.com. And we'll get hooked up and I'll help you the best I can. Yeah, I've been doing that for years and been working out really well. So
yeah, you could definitely tell.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. I appreciate the opportunity to engage your audience, and I look forward to many other opportunities down the road.
Thank you so much. And everybody, all of that information will be in the description of this podcast. So stay tuned for that. And with that, hey, everybody, thank you for listening and have a